chat gets quickly done through. Let's go as well.
Okay, so welcome back to the Honest Athletes podcast, where today we have a super special guest that we are actually going to have him introduce himself to the podcast and tell us a little bit about what he's done, what he's about. Just take it away, Jamie.
Thanks, Lauren. Hannah. So I'll start where I am. I'm current head coach at Venture Excel, which is a performance squad in Derbyshire. We base mostly out the city, and we have a number of clubs that feed in, which is interesting with relationships and talent ID, especially coming out of COVID, because a lot of clubs have been struggling for members, and so that's a challenging piece of work at the minute. It seems like where I've been for the last 6.5 years has been one constant sort of roller coaster ride after another. Lots of issues with pools and relocating and pool time and all sorts. But we're just about to move into a new 50-metre pool, which again is a big piece of work, but it's quite exciting for us. Before that, I was head coach at Nova Centurion, just down the road in Notts. And obviously, you know, the success that we had through the 2000s into up to 2012 and just after, with the likes of Becky and Jess Sylvester and Catherine Wild and all the junior swimmers, I was sort of at the centre of that with Bill, and a great sort of early part of my career, really. I swam at Nova, and then, as I say, it was my boyhood club, and the dream was always to become the head coach, which I managed to do, and it was a real honour to lead that programme as well. So in a nutshell, that's where I've been for the last 22 years, just East Midlands based, head coach at 2 really successful club programmes. Obviously with that, you get opportunities to work with international teams, junior and senior, and particularly with Nova, a lot of international swimmers over that sort of 14-year period. So it's amazing. Like, as you get older, you always say it flew by, and it has flown by 22 years. But it's been one hell of a ride, and that's brought us up to the current day, I guess.
So thank you very much for sharing. Yeah. As you say, 22 years might seem like a long time, but for you know, it's flown past.
Yeah.
But you've dealt with you mentioned a lot of junior swimmers, international experience. So your first club being at Nova Centurion, what were the life lessons that you learned being part of that club? Were you able to take things that you learned from there into Daventio? What was kind of the foundations, I guess, for your coaching career starting off at Nova?
Yeah, well, it was a programme I knew really well because I swam there, and it's a bit like we are in Derbyshire. So you have a lot of small clubs, local clubs feed into that programme. And I came from a local club, Bramcote, and we fed in there at sort of 10, 11 years old and swam there for several years. So Bill was actually my coach. So I was used to the culture, and I was used to the work ethic that we had there. And so when I actually started for 18 months back at my home club, just volunteering. And then Bill found out I was coaching and dragged me onto poolside with Nova. He has a way of persuading people to do things for next to no money or no money. So I was coaching from the age of 20, working with international swimmers because I wanted to learn. And Bill was a tutor as well. So we had loads of coaches coming through our programme through the courses he was running. So my coaching network increased massively straight away. And when we had Sweetenham as the performance director, he put a rule in that any coaches on international teams must have done their full coach. But you had like 20 international coaches who had only done their club coach. So over a period of 2 years, you had like guys who had coached world record holders and Olympic finalists and medalists coming through. And that was an amazing experience for a young coach in his early 20s to learn from those guys, as well as obviously having Bill as a day-to-day mentor. So my apprenticeship was pretty unique, and I'm quite privileged really to have that on the doorstep. The life lessons from a personal perspective, I think when you're young, you think you can do everything, and I literally went full throttle for 12 years, not many breaks, and that sort of catches up with you after a while. I think I did pretty well for 12 years, to be honest. But when I became head coach, I say it was my dream job. I did it for 2 years, and in sort of the first 18 months, I've gone through quite a lot of personal trauma. And it's honest athletes, but I'm always honest in terms of my journey as a coach. So I had some real personal things around relationship breakdown, family issues, bereavement, and it really knocked me for six, and really suffered with some mental health struggles at that point. And that's the reason why I stepped away from what was effectively my dream job. So what I learned really was to make sure that I balance things a lot better in terms of doing the job and having a life away from deck. I still have to remind myself now and again to not push too far, but having that time away from day-to-day coaching for a year between the two roles certainly gave me that space to reflect on where I needed to improve from that time at Nova in terms of my own personal work-life balance, and really figure out what my sort of best qualities were, what my core values were as a coach, and how I was going to operate going into my next role. Does that answer your question, Anna? I think I've summed that up.
No, it has. It was just allowing you to be open and honest, and I really appreciate what you were saying there. That's quite a lot to go through, and as you say, you're still growing and developing as a coach. There's a lot more experiences for you to go through. Yeah,
it was a challenging time. I say I still kept my hand in. Like, I went to Mel asked me to come to Derby and help with Adam because he'd just won Commonwealth Games. It was his first real senior breakthrough as an international swimmer, and being there for her and in sort of a supportive capacity was really it kept my hand in, without sort of any pressure or anything like that. And I really realized that I definitely wanted to get back into it, but I wanted to still take that time to reflect and come back in on my own terms. And I had the swim clinic business, which was sort of every school holidays, which wasn't intense. So always kept involved, but it was definitely giving me that space for a year to really nail down what I wanted to do in my next role. And I thought DX, I knew it would be a project. I think probably underestimated the amount of adversity we'd have to go through in the last sort of 6.5 years, in terms of losing pools, getting boarded up pools open for us, and traveling. And we went to this one pool every night for a year, where it was over an hour each way for me. And then, it's just been a real but we never lost a member. And that was the big thing. Like, we kept the membership together, did it as a unit, saw it as an advantage to go through that adversity. And I feel like it actually hardened us for when we came to the race environment. I would say someone like a Jacob Whittle he's so relaxed in the race environment. He doesn't fear anything, and actually sees it as a real privilege, because we trained in some pretty dire places. And all the kids are like that. Like, they're really grateful when they rock up at Ponds Forge or London Aquatic Centre, because, as I say, we train in wavy ropes. I mean, you grew up with that, Hannah, and you know what it's like. And it definitely gives you something. It gives you an advantage, I think, when you go to these palaces and swim really fast. You love it, and it's such an enjoyable time, I would say.
I like that you called it them palaces. That's quite funny. I don't think anyone's ever called Ponds Forge a palace. I presume that's what you're going for, though. I don't know.
Yeah, if you saw where we train, Lauren, like you'd think it was an absolute 7-star hotel, like Ponds.
I can imagine. But I love that. I think that's amazing. And I think I always like to ask the guests kind of their start in sport themselves. And I would love to ask you because obviously you said you trained under Bill, so you obviously learned a load from that. But what have you taken from your own career in sport and put into as a coach? Because the coaches that have kind of done it themselves, I always find that they take things that they went through or they experienced and try and right the wrongs that maybe they had or things they struggle with, or just have that empathy. So yeah, just tell us a bit more about that.
I would say I was a try-hard as a swimmer. I don't like using the word talent. I think that was probably my talent, is that I really did work hard, but I was always going to be a solid national swimmer, age group finalist level. That was my level. And I think I realised that probably by 15, 16. I swam till 17. And I think the lessons I learned from that was great work ethic, commitment, and that's actually one of my values, like commitment. And I think the others I sort of added as I went into coaching, definitely from a care perspective, and I did quite a lot of coach development stuff around my personality and what that is. And I remember we had this, it's called Insights. We did this Insights profile, and where you answer a massive questionnaire. And I remember handing it to my wife, and she went, basically, that is 99.9% correct. And I was like, oh, right, okay. And when I looked at it and reflected, actually, I think it was really close to what I'm about. And so one of my values is care, and I rate really highly on that empathy scale. And I think I was always like that as a swimmer. I always looked out for my teammates. I was the one that always maybe pointed out maybe where we could do better as a group, or technically we might be able to pick something up. And I guess that's probably why I went into coaching. I think the other big value for me is courage, not being afraid to go for something, taking that leap of faith, and not being afraid to challenge myself, but also the people around me in a positive way. And I was like that as a swimmer very much. If we were in a relay team and we were ranked like 12th, I was like, guys, look, we're stronger than the sum of our parts here. Like we can push for the final, we can push for a medal. And I was always the guy looking for that. And I think I would say that definitely comes through in my coaching and striving. And I remember like my first thing that I was really, really proud of as a coach was when I had the sprint group at Nova, and we had Jess in there and a couple of other like really good juniors, and Sasha Matthews dipped into that as well, and she obviously went on and won a medal. 16th, we had semis. To get into the semis, came 8th to get into the final, and then made the team in 4th. So I always tell that story to the kids, and I said, look, just don't count yourself out because of where you ranked. Rankings, I always think like if you look at your rankings on your computer or on a piece of paper, you chuck them in the water, they get messed up pretty quick. So it's a bit of a false thing for me. It's just a way of someone organising the meet or the champs. And I think go in with an open mind and just believe in your work and the stuff you've done every day, and deliver that in your race plan. And then it gives you confidence, and you can just enjoy the meet. And as I say, we've just done trials, and we had a really good one. We had a couple of kids, and you always kick yourself as a coach when you sort of, they don't quite deliver what you think they're capable of. But they come back and it's reflective and it's a learning experience. But the big hitters who have been there a few times, that, they really stepped up and delivered what we'd planned to do. And we just had a great fun week. And all our trials are like that. Like that's not out of the ordinary. We always go in with a mindset of learning for the younger ones and delivering what they know they can do for the older ones. And we always have fun. And that's a real core thing for me. You got to enjoy it. It's a tough sport, and if you don't enjoy it, it becomes something that I think you probably resent down the line. But hey,
I think you'd summed it up really well previously when you mentioned that, culture is key. And you've obviously worked so hard in developing this culture where, you've not lost any members. The athletes, there's a lot of the big name athletes who are ex-Derby athletes who have moved on to maybe to other programs, but I think they still hold that sort of sense of culture that you guys have worked hard at producing. One of the things I'd love to ask you a little bit more about is, you talked about courage, starting to open up a little bit more about too, but around the menstrual cycle and female health. I know you've worked quite a lot with Mia Slevin and Fitter Women on that, and just wanted a little bit of an insight into how you as a coach came about getting involved in this and your sort of key role with working with Mia on it.
Yeah, sure. So like I've always tried to be quite open and sensitive with the conversation, but open with girls as they're sort of approaching that sort of age of puberty, and I'd sort of touched on it a little bit with Mia the previous season, but we were at our opening season meet, and she was sitting in the sports hall where all the kids, and she was on her own, and we'd had a decent summer, and she'd swam well, and like we'd really sort of galvanized a good working relationship, and I just said, "Oh, you're okay?" And she was sort of, "Yeah, I'm all right, I'm okay." And I said, "Oh, you just seem a little bit off today," and she said, "Oh, I think I'm about to come on," and that's it. Like she literally started to comment, and I was like, oh, "Okay, that's interesting." I said, "I've seen that where you sometimes isolate yourself." I said, is that normally? And she just said, "Yeah, like my mood changes and I withdraw myself." And I said, "Okay." I said, it's funny because like I was just reading some articles this week about the potential of how we could monitor it more closely, and how we could potentially take a bit of an advantage from it in our planning and periodization. And we just started to, like, as a partnership, start to talk more about how Mia could interact more around what she was doing in the training environment. And I wanted to know what she thought a little bit more, because she's always been quite mature. And so we approached her S&C coach. Her name was Laura Wake, her S&C coach at the time, who ran at the Commonwealth Games. She's a track athlete, and she suggested Fitter Woman. So Mia just started logging, and then it just evolved from there. So we read about the app, and we researched it as a sort of partnership, got in touch with the Fitter Woman developers and the company, and they gave a bit more support. And then they said, "Oh, would you come on as a bit?" And we really bought into it once I started to integrate it more into the planning process. And we actually overlapped with what I'd got planned, and maybe where we needed to just ask the question, do we need to adapt here a little bit in terms of maybe a little bit less intensity, or this is the period where where your hormones are actually supportive of strength work, and then we overlapped to GCSE because she was going into GCSEs. So obviously that's a stress point for her. And then trials and European juniors all that year. And she had an amazing season. And it just became a really useful guide to how we plot things out through those sort of cycles 2 and 3 when we really adopted it. And we've done it ever since, really. And it doesn't mean that we do change stuff. It just, I know points, and I can sort of have that conversation with her. Like, I appreciate you in this phase. do we need to tweak anything on the end of the week? Just let me know, and we can. And it doesn't need to be a huge change with her, and it's obviously individual. But it might be, instead of going like a full-on fastest pace best average set, we might go on-offs, or we might go like a descend set instead, just to take a little bit of the load out. And it just means that she can manage that part of her menstrual cycle a little bit better from a fatigue point of view, or maybe an injury prevention point of view, because obviously there's a little bit of research around certain points in the month where she's more susceptible to sort of like ACL type injuries or anything like that. So if she's doing any jumping in the gym, for example, the S&C coach is aware of those points. So yeah, really useful tool. I'd recommend all coaches really to look into it and explore it with their athletes. And I would say start the conversation young. Like, we do stuff in program where we haven't done it so much during COVID because we'd like to get them in a room, but where Mia, one of the senior girls, and myself will just start the conversation with parents and kids when they're in our younger squad. So I guess that's like 11, 12, younger age group. It's really interesting when you get a dad turn up, because like, and actually they take a lot out of it, because it just normalizes the conversation for them. And then we normally get the mum come in and say, "Oh, can you just run me through what you said?" Just so they're all on the same page. But it's good because, as I say, it takes the taboo away from it, and as I say, keeps the conversation open and makes it a little bit less scary for those younger guys. Even if they haven't quite got to that stage yet, at least they're starting to understand and learn what is going to happen. So it makes it a little bit more manageable, I guess.
Well, it's great to hear you talking about that, because you don't hear many coaches being open and honest like that, and supportive and wanting to, just support swimmers in that way. So it's great to hear you talk like that, Jamie, to be honest. But, there's a lot of pressure on coaches, because as a swim coach, you have a lot of swimmers, unless you're at somewhere where you're quite lucky and you've just got a few that you can really focus on and put a lot of work into. But normally coaches have a lot of swimmers. How have you sort of learned to manage being able to give everyone the attention that, you want to, but also not absolutely killing yourself? And I'm sure you have done that, and I'm sure you'll continue to do that at points when you're excited, and you want to be excited about everyone and give everyone the same sort of attention. To any coaches that are listening or wanting to go into coaching and stuff like that, how do you manage that?
Good question. I'm really fortunate that we've got some great squad coaches, and they, support the philosophy of the program. They understand, the way that I would want to develop those kids through the younger squads. And I always try and make sure I have at least one session with the youngest group, a couple of sessions with the middle group. And we're quite a small program, around 50 swimmers. And we have obviously a lot of base clubs that feed into that. So that helps with me. But if you're in a program with hundreds of kids, I think you just got to make sure that your coaching team's bought into that philosophy, and there's some real care taken around your sort of staff education, I would say. Make sure that as a line manager, as a head coach, that you're interacting with those groups on a regular basis and checking in with them. As I say, I'm in a fortunate position. I would say that we're not a huge program. So for a bigger club program, I say you've got to delegate and make sure that you're hiring the right people, and trust those people to deliver a quality service to those swimmers and parents, because it's a combined journey for the family, not just for the guys in the pool, I always say. I think communication is just huge. And I think nowadays, when I started out, you didn't have social media. Emails were infrequent, and you saw parents at the pool, and that was it, really. Now, I get 40 emails a day. I probably have to reply to half of them. Social media is really key because we have to put out good messaging. We have a team app, which we send stuff out. So that's really important that we try and keep on top of that. But also, social media is such a big resource for swimmers and parents and coaches. So it's making sure that you guide people towards the right information on that. I think that's important. I think reliable resources are so valuable. And there's some great podcasts out there. There's some great sort of infographic stuff you can pick up from Twitter. So we use resources like that, and we have a number of speakers come in as well to deliver messages, just so it come in from a different voice. Through lockdown, we really hit home with that. Hannah did something for us, which was excellent. We had people like Kyle Chalmers speak to the kids just through contacts that I had in Australia. So using your network and making sure the right messages and communication is there just to build trust throughout your program is really, really key, I would say.
Following on from that, that sort of, again, going back to that culture that you guys have set up, it goes to show the strength as a club and a community that you have going through COVID until now. I kind of want to touch a little bit on Jacob Whittle coming through. He broke out at a very, very young age. And with as big a program as you guys have, how do you manage someone who breaks out in performance like that and manage it through your club training, and also for him to develop into a senior athlete and maintain, I guess, that talent and performance?
Yeah. So it's funny because Jacob joined literally within the week or two that I became head coach. He just started and he was swimming 3 sessions a week with DX, and he was still doing sessions with his home club, Ripley. He had a great club coach called Glenn Fisher, who's now our regional squad coach. So that's a nice progression and continuation from a coaching journey perspective. But back to Jacob, he just progressed more and more to full time, probably over that first 6 months. So he was 11, and he transitioned from Glenn in his home club to guy called Jack Chambers, who has just left us. Actually, he's been with us 6 years, and he coached age group through Jacob through his first sort of age group period. Did a great job technically with him, laying in some really great foundational work. Built his aerobic capacity in a nice, safe overload way. He was multi-stroke, so like you wouldn't look at him. He's a bit rough around the edges, but he was a British junior record on backstroke. He freestyle, IM, like he could do anything, and he always swam like distance freestyle. He was really keen to do that as an age group, so he swam a lot of 15s, at least 2 or 3 a year. Did IMs, full range. I remember short course, he even did like 200 breast, 200 fly and things. So full range of events, lots of different experience for him, learning experiences. And then when he like really grew, we started to like obviously make sure that he had the right support around him from an S&C point of view, because we were quite wary that someone that growing that fast is quite susceptible to pick things up. And so we started to really look at his movement literacy on land. And at the time, we had a partnership with an organisation called the Derbyshire Institute of Sport, which gave us sort of S&C and psych and nutritional support. And we introduced Jay to that probably from 13, I would say. Yeah, I'd say 13. And that was just almost teaching him how to move and balance and stand up straight, because he I say he grew that fast that every time he got on the block, he looked like he was going to topple over. So that was really handy. So great age group coach, and then Jack, and then he broke his first age record at 30. And what we decided was that he was fast enough to move to me, like without a doubt. At the end of that season, performance-wise in racing, he should be in my group. But he still had some technical refinement that he needed to nail down off what we'd seen in that last cycle up to the summer. So we did it gradually. He did a couple of sessions a week with me, but they were like the low intensity sessions, technical stuff. And then he remained with Jack. Half term in October, we put him up for the full week because we felt like he's off. He can rest a bit more between sessions. Then he went back to 2 sessions. Then at Christmas, he was full time again. And then we thought, right, okay, we could probably bring him in full time now. He'd moved on technically, the areas that we thought he needed to move on. And then it just really went crazy. So we went to Dubai. He started like locking off loads. He was going 52 low, 100 freestyle long course, 23 high, 50. And he was swimming other stuff as well, like really impressive stuff, like nearly breaking age group records on other events. Then we went to trials. And again, the messaging was, it's your first trials, just going to enjoy it. You've done a really good job training-wise. Let's just go and learn. And I remember like, he swam like a 50.4 or something from an outside lane in the heat. And everyone's going nuts. And he came back and he was like smiling, and he's like, he said, I'm just going to go and swim down. I was like, yeah, cool. I said, you might get a second swim with that. And there's a couple of coaches sort of turned and he was like, oh, you think? And I was like, yeah. So get your swim down and then we'll look at it. So all dead relaxed and just having fun. And I remember him in the swim down, he was having a good old laugh. And then he goes into like the B final as a 14-year-old and goes 50.3 or something, 50.2, I don't know. And obviously goes to European Juniors and EYF, and at European Juniors in the semis, he went 49.9, and everyone's going bonkers. But it was just pure, like, before he gets down to race, we were talking about, because he loves cars and things, so we were just talking about cars and steam engines. He loves steam engines. So, yeah, like, it's just, he knows how to race. We'd already practiced stuff in the meets before. So I'm not going to repeat myself and just say, just remember your plan, you're all good. And away he goes and races, and he just enjoys it. And I think that's something that we want for all the swimmers that come through the X. COVID was interesting, like, obviously, because he had done so well as a junior, he got funding, he was on podium potential. So we got access at the National Centre, which helps. And so he was in and out National Centre, and then when we got back in, he was coming in to DX. And when we got that sort of third lockdown at the beginning of 2021, obviously the Olympics had been delayed. I'll backtrack a little bit. He'd been to the got an invite to the ISL, so that was interesting. But it was a great move because it just meant he could train and he could do his school remotely, and he was just focused. And Mark Spackman, who's at the Royal, he looked after him out there. I was going to go, but we just had so much going on in program, and I had some stuff at home. I just couldn't afford the 6 weeks to go out with him. So Mark did a really good job, who'd been on the junior team with us as well. So Mark knew him, had a nice relationship there. So it was easy speaking to Mark most days, what he was doing. And so it gave him an uninterrupted training, but it also gave him an exposure to senior swimming, which he'd not had before. So he learned a lot in that 6 weeks, how to sort of manage himself, be around senior swimmers. And they say the Olympics were postponed. And so I started to think, well, he's probably got more of a shout if it is postponed. And third lockdown hit, Mel said, can you come in and help? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. Because I was just doing remote coaching, doing Zooms and stuff. So I went in as part of that elite returns training, and we had literally a clear run through to trials and then into the games. And it was the best thing that the Olympics were delayed, because I don't think he'd have done it the year before. And then being delayed and having that experience of the ISL, and then us having that exposure in the national centre, it's loads of space. We had that camera system. I could do what we wanted, and it was fantastic. And it just helped move him on. And there was no way he was going to come back into, Queen's Leisure Centre after he'd been in there. So it was like, you need to stay here, really, Jay. And so when we got back in after trials, I split my time between DX and the centre to continue to work with Jacob and the guys who I'd worked with, people like Anna Hopkin, and Adam was there, and Luke Greenbank and Elliot Clogg. And so I'd already got a really good relationship with them, and Mel thought it would be really beneficial me going in, and I really enjoyed it, actually. And obviously DX were getting back in, and that was exciting. So it's a great time leading up to Tokyo. And then we finished Tokyo, we came back and obviously had the ISL again. And this time, because it was early season, I was like, well, I'll do it, and supported Jacob through that. And he swam really well short course. But he was never going to come back into, as I say, DX and Queen's Leisure Centre. So he stayed with Mel, and he goes to college across the road. He's a really bright lad, but he wanted to do something in like engineering, like mechanical engineering, because he wants to go on and work in cars at F1 probably. So we were fortunate that they did that course, because not many colleges do that course. So he went in, stays a bit in Loughborough and a bit at home back in Derbyshire. And as I say, I've continued to work with that group a few times a week. So I keep there as like a bit of a sounding board and working with those guys. So it's been a really easy transition for him into that national centre environment. And I say Mel's been really supportive. British women have been really supportive, actually. And as I say, I think for him, it was a little bit of a blessing that the Olympics were delayed, because it gave us that extra time to develop and put him in the right place to make that team, and then go on and have a great Tokyo. It's just typical Jacob, like he loved it, he enjoyed it. He got lost coming back from one of his swims and got shouted at by a volunteer. Like, he's got full of stories like that, where he took the wrong turn and ended up in a car park and all sorts. So yeah, typical Jay, and his feet are firmly on the ground, which is great. And I think that's always been the strong message from his family and myself is making sure you keep your feet on the ground and soak it up and learn as much as you can. And as I say again, his family are fantastic. Like, they've been really supportive of me and him, relationship, and what we've done at DX to get him to the point where he is now.
Thank you for sharing that kind of journey, because it's always so nice to hear a journey that works so well and obviously has flowed into different parts of him learning and developing and growing and stuff like that. So no, it's amazing to hear stories like that, that's for sure. I think every coach dreams of having those stories. So thank you for sharing that. Speaking of development, though, you are soon to be taking up a new role, if I'm correct, at Bath National Centre. So could you just tell us a little bit more about that? Because that is super exciting, definitely well-deserved. And I'd just love to hear what's going on there.
Yeah, so it's one of those bittersweet. Like, DX is probably been the most challenging, but the most fun time of my career, if it one of. And the people at DX mean a lot. And that's the sort of bitter bit. I'm leaving something that I love, and my heart's always going to be there. So I'll say that first. But from a head point of view, it felt like the right move at the right time. Really exciting to work with Dave McNulty down in Bath is someone that I've admired from afar and sort of had brief interactions with over the years, but not spent a lot of time with. So that's exciting for me from a development point of view, working alongside someone with that experience. I get to work with Bill again, which we haven't really worked as closely for 10 years really. So that was a draw, because obviously worked with him a lot when I was younger as a swimmer and then as a coach. So returning to that is going to be really, really useful. And I think obviously that's an easy working relationship, and that'll help the top end of the sport. It's just a fantastic environment. Like, you walk in that pool at Bath, and you've got the gym just as you go in, and the courts. It's all under one roof. Everything's dead tight knit. And as soon as I walked in there for this sort of interviews process and everything, I just really knew that that's where I wanted to work, and where I felt like I could add most value as a coach. Obviously, you think back in my career, we had almost a centre environment when we were at Nova, with those international swimmers, juniors and seniors. We had 16 internationals at one point on the top group. We had S&C, all the support you could imagine around that programme. And I think, we were just about there with that at DX, which is really exciting. But going into the national centre during the lockdowns up to Tokyo and supporting Mel's group, I really started to make me think, this is where my real sort of hunger and passion lies as a coach, and where the level I want to work at full time. So when the opportunity came up, I spoke to a few trusted people, obviously my wife, because she has a big say in it, and decided to go for it. And I really love the process of going. You had to go through to apply, and it's an exciting move. In the next month or so, I'll be down there, and we're just sorting out all the recruitment back in Derby to make sure that the success continues along the path that I've laid out, and we continue the culture that's there, but also they're going to have some fresh ideas coming in, which I think is really exciting for the swimmers. So yeah, it's one of those bittersweet ones, Lauren, I think, but really exciting to get down there and work with the group. I've met all the swimmers, and they say that they're a really great bunch of people, really hungry to move on, to deliver sort of the success that British swimming want at that Olympic level, which is what the centres are for.
Can safely say, I think, everybody wishes you all the very best with the new move, and look forward to kind of seeing what the next steps and the next chapter for you hold. There's a question that I've asked a couple of the guests, and this one I'd like to ask you this too. First one is, going back to 22 years ago, and you're just starting fresh, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself 22 years ago? And the other question is, what advice would you give to aspiring coaches looking to take on, not just in swimming, but coaching in general? Do you have any tips or advice?
Oh, good question. I would probably say, don't rush. Like, take your time, because it is. And I mean that in a couple of ways, I think. So you're always hungry to get going and coach this level and that level. And I think like I was at Nova as a coach for 14 years, 12 before I became a head coach. And actually, I was always like, I want to be at that. I want to be at that. And I think it's that old rat race, isn't it? You want to move on, and it showed keenness, I guess, but I definitely overworked at times, right? Like Lauren, you touched on it. Coaches have this tendency, and there's a bit of a culture in the industry to push yourself to excess. It's constant early mornings, late at night. You're constantly doing stuff through the day, planning, and I think I missed sort of being present for sort of personal stuff, like I was constantly thinking of how we could move this on, or how we could develop that set, or what were the opportunities for relays at nationals, or whatever it was. And I was thinking about that at family meals, and I was missing important dates with people that mattered to me. And I think, and I still do it now, if I'm honest. I'm a lot better, but I've definitely, I would say, given a lot to the sport where I've sort of pushed personal stuff to the side. Even though I've been there, I haven't been present in the moment with the people that mattered. And I think for any coach that's setting out, make sure that you give yourself that moment, those important moments away from the poolside with the people that matter to you. I think that will probably be the number one advice. Like, don't feel like you've got to do everything all the time. Like you owe it to yourself and the people that matter to you to be present at those special moments with family or friends. And I certainly wasn't, I would say. So that, and it's interesting. I listened to a podcast from Dave Brailsford, and he said something similar, and I could really relate to that. And I've heard a few high-level coaches in American sports say that, and I could definitely, as I say, from my early years and even now, like I've just come back off holiday with my wife, and because we got so much going on back in Derby, it was a great time from a coaching perspective because the swimmers had just done trials, they were on a break or just building back in. So it's a great time for me to go then. But from a program and management point of view, there was just so much to do at the minute from organisation and admin perspective. Like I was probably doing a few hours work every day while I was there. And that's just what needs to be done. I've got a very understanding wife, but that would be my number one bit of advice. When you'd have your breaks, make sure they're breaks. And when you're with special people in your life, make sure that you're present. You're not just there in body, you're also there in mind. Never stop learning. Like I learn every day. I'm always reading, and whether it's social media or books or papers, journals. Like I had a meeting with a coach before I met you guys, and I learned something from that. And he coaches one of our local clubs, and he's a great guy. It doesn't necessarily need to be about swimming. It can be anything. But I think it always adds value to you as a person if you learn. And what else I would say? Leave your ego at the door. Like ego just gets in the way of so many opportunities for you as a coach and for your swimmers. So, always listen. Always, it doesn't matter how young the kid is. Like actually listen and be an active listener with what they're saying, because it's important. It's their journey. You're there just to support it. People have said to me, "Oh, you're going to coach like a week or two in this pool, and you've been a part of the journey." I said, "Yeah, but the pool ain't been for me. The pool has been for the swimmers that are going to move into it, and it's going to be for the swimmers, generations of swimmers that are going to go through that facility." It was never, the work behind that pool has never been for me in any way. So that's always been my response to that. You never, if you're in coaching for the right reasons, you don't do it for you. You do it for the people that you're trying to impact every day. And I've been really fortunate. I've had the opportunity to work with some amazing people, and I've learned something from every single one of them. And I hope that will be my philosophy going forward down in Bath. I want to learn, and I want to add value to the people in the program. And I want to be there and impact over a long time at that level. That's my vision for my role in that centre.
The reason me and Hannah love doing these podcasts is because we learn from every single guest. And I think today it's been amazing. but we've had Patrick Miley as well, obviously Hannah's dad, and you, Jamie. And I think for any coaches listening or anyone who wants to go into coaching, what two great people to have on and listen to and learn from. So thank you for that. That's been wonderful. And thank you for opening up to us today, a little bit about your journey and what you're going on to next and all those kinds of things. And like Hannah said before, we just wish you the best of luck, and we know that it's going to be amazing for you down in Bath with a great group of swimmers, and especially with Nutty. He's definitely going to be fantastic to work with, I'm sure. So, we wish you all the best of luck in the world. And just thank you again for coming on and chatting to us today. No,
you're welcome. I say, you probably learn a lot more from Patrick. I do. I literally every conversation with Patrick, and he's such a fountain of knowledge, and I've got a massive amount of respect for the guy. So I love the podcast with Pat, actually. And as I say, it's we need to use people like that with their experience in the sport much more, I would say. I mean, what an asset to Scottish swimming and to British swimming to have someone like that that's so willing to give. But no, thank you for your kind words, and thank you for having me on, and all the best with the podcast moving forward and all your projects. I know you're both involved with quite a few things, so all the best with it, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Definitely. Thanks, Jamie. And thank you for everyone listening to the podcast today. This is actually the final episode of this season, so we hope you've enjoyed it, and hopefully we will see you soon.